Hi, welcome to Tales from the Sky Lounge. It's a podcast about business, consulting, and venture investing. We get out there in the world and we find people who are making it happen in the world and get their stories. So today in the Sky Lounge, Bart Foster. Hi, Bart.
Hey, buddy.
Welcome to the Sky
What's
Lounge.
happening, Todd? It's been a long
It's
time,
been
man.
a minute. Yeah. So, Bart, you are one of these dynamic guys that's always doing really cool, interesting things. But before we get into it too far, why don't you give us a quick intro about your background? Who are you?
I'm trying to think when you and I met. It was going to be in Atlanta, right?
Yeah.
Through the tech
Yeah.
incubator, ATDC.
Yep.
Was that where we both
Yep.
running businesses?
Yeah, I think we were CEOs, young CEOs, at about the same time, going through that grist mill that is fundraising in the South.
Sure.
And that's when I met you. And then I think we actually did a little bit of triathlon together. So we've literally walked a few miles
That's
together.
right. Yeah, I was a big company guy for a number of years. I was with Kellogg's selling cereal and Rice Krispie treats and Pop-Tarts and all that. I was on the sales side, and then joined an internet grocery firm based out of Montreal. You may have heard of Instacart. We were Instacart 15 years too early. Didn't work, a little early. Same model, it's just too early. And then I was in Atlanta, and I was, in Atlanta, you got to manage your commute. And I was literally driving around trying to figure out, like, I need to get a job somewhere. And I saw the eye care division of Novartis. And it was a contact lens company, and I kind of weaved my way and got in there. And I thought I'd do a 2-3 year marketing stint and move on, do something entrepreneurial. And I got in there and figured out, wait a minute, this is a global company. And I'd always wanted to live overseas, and they gave me an opportunity to live in England, and I was selling contact lenses. So Walmart was one of my biggest customers, and that's how I ended up incubating a business that we'll talk about that I ended up spinning out eventually, which became a company called Solo Health. And that's where you and I met, and kind of left the mothership, started a new company. So we'll get into that and talk about, how I grew it, how I scaled it, and the trials and tribulations and some failures and success along the way. But
Let's talk about that. Spin out. And you do epic things, which I, hopefully we could talk about a couple of the epic things you've done, which, is always incredible. So let's talk about Solo Health, right? So you were at Novartis SIBA, right? Which is the old name, right? And then so it's always fascinating. Was that a spin out? Like, surely you had some support from the mothership to help you get going.
A little bit,
but then it's super entrepreneurial, and then you're kind of on your own, So maybe kind of walk us through. Okay, you're in a lunchroom at what point, or out for drinks, or where's the napkin?
So the general
at a company like that.
I'm sitting in Birmingham, England, and Walmart is my biggest customer, and they said, help us figure out a way to drive traffic from the stores, the Walmart stores, into the vision center.
Okay, and
we hired this consulting firm, and I'm in the back of the room, and we're trying to come up with ideas. And I said, guys, what if we had a kiosk that would screen your vision, and it would tell you if you're 20/20? And so instead of like, what's better, 1 or 2, you just kind of dial it in and prints out a report. And in my head, it was so clear. And the consultant on the whiteboard was like, oh yeah, that's cool enough. You wrote it down. I'm like, no, like that's the idea. Like that's it. And I couldn't sleep for 2 weeks. I wrote the basis of the business plan, started communicating back and forth with the general counsel and the head of business development. And eventually they wrote to me and they said, hey, we think we should file a patent on this. The patent's going to be your name. And I got all excited. Anyway, get an opportunity to move back to the U.S.
Yeah.
And I took a job that would allow me some flexibility to work on this, what was really called a passion project. It was never a full-time job. It was always something that, hey, Bart, if you want to work on that nights and weekends, that's okay. But, you got a full-time job over here.
Mm-hmm.
And I did, and I incubated it. And there's so many cool stories about how I was able to cobble together some cash and actually build a prototype. But eventually spun out the company in 2007. It wasn't a traditional spin out. They had an opportunity to sit on the board. But what we did is we acquired the IP. They had some stipulations that said you had to raise $1.2 million within 6 months.
Oh, geez. Okay.
Which I thought, that's no problem.
Yeah.
That's going to be easy. And it turns out that was really hard, but we did
2008, right? That was when all the banks were crashing and it was all the money evaporated.
And it was. Yeah. Anyway, it was really tough, and there's some interesting stories about that. And I'm one of the only people that ever out-licensed from Novartis. If they're not going to do something, they just shelve it. There's no reason for them to out-license; it's just too much of a pain. But the deal that they made me as part of being CEBA Vision, which is a division, they didn't realize that actually Novartis, the parent, owns all the IP. But by the time it all got through, it was kind of too late. And they were like, well, we have to give it to them now.
Yeah.
So spun out in 2007. I was employee number 1, as the founder of the company. Mm-hmm. And it was exciting. And I can share the whole journey.
Who did you so you come at this from a different background than I do. You're sales and marketing guy. I'm an engineer guy, right? So engineers, hey, you got to go build stuff. You kind of built stuff. Okay, so now you're in business. You got some intellectual property. You got a little bit of capital. What's the first thing you do? What's going through your head? How do you approach the market? How do you get this company off the ground?
So we wanted to build prototypes. So we built 5 that, looking back, they looked hard, but they worked, right? And we put these into Walmart, and then we ended up putting in a drugstore, a Kroger. Like we put in into a mall, and we just want to know, like, will people use it, and would they expect to pay? Would it be free? Like all these things, and we did a lot of work around usability. Is it too high? Is it too low? Is it the right color? The ergonomics, the human factors, and what the questions you go through on a touchscreen, because it used adaptive logic. So if we know you're over 40, we're going to ask the questions a little bit differently. It was bilingual, and it had the ability to screen your vision. So that's kind of how we started. Then we got success. We raised some more money, and we built 100 units. We said, hey, test market's going to be Atlanta and St. Louis. And we started testing, and we learned a tremendous amount. One of the things was the eye doctors were absolutely scared shitless, and they didn't want us to do this at all. Even though it was a referral model, we were trying to drive people in to get an eye exam. The American Optometric Association, they shit all over it. And it I learned the hard way that it's one of the most powerful lobbies outside of the NRA.
No kidding.
Because they have people in 50 states, different associations. Anyway,
you never know, right? So
we
had this great idea, and you're helping them out, and
but the pocket of success, was in Walmart, and we looked at test versus control. We had 5 stores in Atlanta that had a kiosk and 5 that didn't. Very similar demographic makeup, heavy African American, heavy Hispanic. We had a rural market, one in suburbia. And we were able to show that the stores that had a kiosk, the sales of vision products, contact lenses, services, eye drops, all of it, were 13% higher than the ones that didn't have a kiosk over 6 months. Yeah. And you extrapolate that out, I think it was worth like 30, 40 million. It was like, oh my gosh, this is going to be great. I fly up to Walmart, Bentonville, Arkansas.
Nice.
And I was confident. Now I was a little worried because we'd spent all of our cash. Like literally, we're out of cash. And this is 2008 when the market's getting ready to tank. And Dr. John Aguinobi was the first MD ever hired at Walmart.
Okay.
And he says, and I'm in a room with 12 SVPs. And he said, hey, Bart, before you start, he's like, I just got to ask you a couple questions. He said, you know that the Walmart vision business is underneath health and wellness, which also includes pharmacy, right? I said, yeah. He said, how big is the whole vision industry? And I said, well, between contact lenses and glasses and services, it's $29 billion. And he said, well, Bart, the Walmart pharmacy business, it's $32 billion.
Wow.
He said, so what moves your needle doesn't move mine. He said, in fact, I don't give 2 shits about vision.
Wow.
And he said, you know what? That end cap you're taking at the end of the aisle, he said, it's worth $1 billion a year. you should pay me to be here.
Wow.
And I was like, God. I was like, oh shit, this isn't going very well. And he said, yeah. He said, Bart, we have 140 million shoppers a week that shop my stores. That's what he said. He said, I don't care if I put chapstick or lip balm or Doritos. He said, it's worth $1 billion. He said, you can't take up the end cap and just sit there.
Wow.
But then he said, but listen, because I was ready to just pack my bags and get out of there. And he said, that old outdated blood pressure machine in the corner? He said, I hate it. He said, it's not networked. It's a dumb device. People are spilling milkshakes on it. But he said, my operations team said I can't get rid of it because it's the number one loyalty driver in pharmacy. He said, Betty comes every Wednesday and she gets her blood pressure. If it's not there, she's going to go across the street to Walgreens. We can't have that. Mm-hmm. He said, have you ever thought about combining the two, like vision and blood pressure? And I thought I was really smart. And I was like, well, John, yeah, that's why we need the company Solo Health. I said, would you consider funding the R&D for exclusivity? Like, we won't take it to Target or anything else. And he leans back. He's like, no. He's like,
you got to pay me.
We're Walmart. He said, I'm just going to tell IBM and NCR and Diebold, and that's what I want. The first guys that bring it to me, that's what we're going to do.
Oh, wow.
And Todd, I remember getting out of that meeting, and you and I knew each other at this time. Mm-hmm. I was so anxious and scared and just this pit in my stomach. I can even feel it right now. It's just, and I looked down at my phone, and I had like 6 text messages from some of my investors, my employees, and how'd it go? Are we going to scale? Like, what's next? And I didn't even have the heart to respond. I just got on the plane and it sucked.
Entrepreneurism is a hard business, isn't it? There's a lot of times when you're very lonely and you got a lot of weight on your shoulders, for sure.
Yeah.
It's a hard thing.
But my COO picked me up from the airport and he said, hey, while you're gone, he's like, we found this grant through the federal government. He said, it's not exactly what we're doing. It's pretty close. And I think we have a good shot. And he said, it's using medical, technology to educate consumers in rural markets. And long story short, we ended up applying for this grant, got a $1.2 million grant. And we put our head down for a year and built the first Solo Health station. And nice. I got a call in the summer of 2012 that I waited for 4 years, and it was from Walmart. And they said, your pilots have exceeded our expectations. How soon can you be in 4,000 stores?
Heck yeah.
And it really, it took off from there.
Wow. The pendulum swings heavy. That is an awesome story. So you did pretty good at Solo Health and scaled the business. And then at some point, what happened? How did that end up? You decided to move to Colorado.
This is the best part of the story. So probably spring of 2014, I think it was. Maybe so. You fast forward 2 years, we scaled. We're in 4,000 locations. We raised $50 million in capital. Wow. We had Dell come in, gave us $25 million in debt to scale. We had Anthem, Blue Cross Blue Shield, Redbox. If you remember those guys, they led our Series A.
Nice.
Had a fairly powerful board. We had the number 2 guy from former Walgreens guy. And my chairman asked me to go to breakfast, and we went to the Flying Biscuit. You know where that is? And he said, how big do you want this company to get? And I shared with him a number, and he said, Bart, every once in a while, I see a company that had all the makings of going public. And he said, this is one of those times. He said, we'll have to make a few changes. And I said, yeah, we'll probably need a new CFO and this. And I wasn't picking up what he was laying down. Mm-hmm. Then he said, Bart, I would even consider being CEO for a while. He said, but I'd only want to do it if you're okay with it. And you got any title you want. Why don't you take the weekend and talk with your wife? And I just remember thinking, what? Like, that's my job.
Yeah. And I got company. In the car. I did this. Yeah.
I got in the car and I cried. Okay. And then I got angry, and then I got confused, and then I was, am I getting pushed out of the company I founded? And I called the board and each one, and I thought, maybe I'm the last guy to know. And all of them are like, no, you're the CEO. Like, we'll talk to him. Don't worry. And the next board meeting, there was an executive session. It's usually 15, 20 minutes, and I'm sitting outside the room. And this one was an hour and a half. And I'm sitting there, and the number 2 guy comes out, and he says, hey, Bart, you're still the CEO. He said, but we're going to make him executive chairman. I said, oh, what's that mean? It's like, well, you're going to start seeing a lot more. He's going to come to the office, and he has the ability to hire and fire. Like, oh, okay. And it was tough, man. And I come to the office the first day, and we have a startup culture. We're all wearing jeans and he comes in with a 3-piece suit and shiny shoes, and it's just like fish out of water. And, out of respect, I give him the seat at the table at the head of the table. And I open the meeting with my executive team, and I said, guys, I'm really excited that he's here, and he's going to help us take it to the next level. Like, we're really proud that, we've taken it so far. And he puts his hand on my shoulder, and the next thing he says is, Bart, I just got to commend you for stepping aside. And I was just gutted, and
oh my God.
We were planning to have lunch, across the street, and after the meeting's over, we're walking. I can't even get through the parking lot and just light him up and just start throwing F-bombs. And I just was
no kidding. Yeah.
And he said, you don't get it, do you? And essentially he was playing from an NFL playbook, and I was a first-time CEO, and I didn't know. And he had it all mapped out. And long story short, I got forced out of the company I founded, and it was probably the hardest 3 months of my life, though,
Sure.
Leading up to that. And I think I felt embarrassed and angry and confused and pissed off and lonely. I didn't know what I was going to do next.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a hard spot for sure. So you talked to your wife, your last great trusted advisor.
Well, I went back into the company. I just said, I'm not ready to leave. And it was very contentious for a period of time. And
okay,
he said, you're out of here. And I said, I'm not fucking going anywhere. I'm the founder of this company.
Mm-hmm.
And I ended up negotiating kind of the exit. And monetarily, I hit a single. Lifestyle, I hit a home run, because it put me on a whole new path and a whole new trajectory. And what I'm doing now, I can't imagine creating a better life and a better job and career, and a life with harmony and balance, and a life with intention. And I'm really, really intentional with what I do, who I spend time with, and it's amazing. And I wouldn't have had that had I not had this wake-up call,
It's a gut-wrenching story. I think it happens to a lot of founders. It's never pleasant.
It was way better when I figured that out. But in the beginning, it's like, I must be the only person in the world. And once I talked to a couple of their founders, like, oh yeah, it happened to me. It was like so liberating. It was like, oh my God, really?
Mm-hmm.
And in hindsight, like, shit, I probably stayed 2 years too long. Like, I was ready to go. I talked to actually one of my younger board members, and I kind of hinted at it. I was like, I kind of ready to move on, whenever. And I think he was young and naive, and he was, probably wasn't picking up what I was laying down. And he's like, no, you're the guy. Like, keep your head down, and like, we need to focus on these milestones, whatever. So I didn't bring it up again. But I was ready to go. I was a startup guy. It was great to, but when it got into this logistics and operation, I mean, with 4,000 units, they're getting used 4 million times a month, and things are breaking and all kinds of stuff. And financially, super capital intensive.
Sure.
And I'm not a finance guy. I'm a sales guy.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, my only regret is not manufacturing my own exit. I could have stepped aside and been the chairman and brought in a CEO. But I didn't know that was even possible. Should have had tech CXO.
Yeah.
They would have helped me.
Yeah, sure. And actually, it's a funny story. I was a client of TechCXO at that same time period.
I was too.
So, I had a CFO. That's all you could get back then.
Fred Bombach,
so that's kind of
man.
a funny
Is he
thing.
still worth you guys?
I'm not sure. I have to go
He
look
was
him
early
up.
on. He was tech CFO before you guys changed it over, but
Absolutely.
He was our first
Absolutely.
CFO back in 2007 and 8.
So, so when we were in this triathlon club together, we ran with a bunch of people that, the saying was do epic shit. So, you are an embodiment of that, so I think at some point, you're always kind of pushing it a little bit more, and, I think at one point you came up and you said, "Hey, I'm going to do the Alcatraz triathlon." You want to talk about that? Like what made you think to go do, push the boundaries? What is it about things like that are difficult and a little bit unusual and a little bit scary, maybe? What do you get out of things like that when you go do an Alcatraz triathlon?
So
as an example?
It's interesting. So at the time, I didn't really know about. I've done a ton of like introspective work over the last 7 or 8 years, looking at what do I really value? What are my personal values? What's my zone of genius? And I learned that, aliveness in personal freedom, adventure, curiosity, lifelong learning, family, these are all things I value. These are my top values. And for me, like doing a triathlon makes me feel alive. Now, doing something that's even crazier, of like the Alcatraz, like swimming from the Alcatraz back to that's even nuttier, right? But it makes me feel alive. Like when you jump in the water, it's 52 degrees. Like that makes you feel alive really quick.
Yeah.
So I think it was always this thirst to live life to the fullest, and realizing that life is short, and why not do things that are meaningful and make you feel alive. And I also realized that when I do hard things, time slows down, and I create these memorable moments. So it's just what I like to do. And it's not about the event itself. It's more the journey and the training and the, meeting neat people and doing things unique. And it just makes me a better person.
Yep. When you take care of yourself, a lot of interesting things snap into place, and things get a little bit more easy, or simple is probably a better word. So you moved to Colorado. Why did you pick Colorado? What is it about Colorado that's interesting?
So interesting part of the story. So I was in Atlanta. I didn't know what I was going to do next. We went up the Northeast. We did a meeting that YPO had. It was a family meeting, and I remember my wife and I walked in this room, and it was this life coach. I think he's from Atlanta, actually. His name's Tommy Newberry, and he had a slide up on the screen, and it said, "How many spring breaks and summers do you have left before your oldest goes to college?" We're like, holy shit, like 8 years, 8 spring breaks, 8 summers. And it just created a sense of urgency. And the very next resource, we take a break and go into this other room, and there's this guy, Jim Sharp, and he teaches at Harvard Business School with his wife on how to find a business to buy. So I was like, maybe I'll buy a business. I don't want to do the startup thing again. That was hard, right? Maybe I'll buy a business.
Yeah.
And the one thing I took away from his talk, he said, there's businesses all over the world, different sizes, stages, culture, industries. He said, pick where you want to live first and then figure it out. And he called it the zip code strategy.
Okay.
And that night, my wife and I sat in bed, and she's like, maybe we should move. Like, we don't have any ties to Atlanta. I'm like, really? She's like, yeah, like the zip code thing. And she's like, 8 spring breaks, 8 summers. Like, if we're going to do it, like, I don't know. And before I noted, I looked over, and she had her laptop out, and she's Googling best place to raise a family.
Okay.
And healthiest cities and best cities for walkability.
Okay.
And I was like, well, shit, I'm going to Google my own list. I get my iPad, and I Googled best cities for entrepreneurs and best cities for outdoor adventure. And well, I didn't know this at the time, but Boulder, Colorado was on every list.
Oh, wow.
And she looked at me. She's like, "Hey, check this out. Boulder, Colorado." And I got the chills because it was on my list too.
Yep.
And one of my investors felt sorry for me, I think, when I got forced out. And he said, "Hey, why don't you take the summer off?" He's like, "If you're going to go to Colorado, stay at my place in Aspen."
No kidding.
So I was
okay.
like, okay. So we had a trip planned, and we extended it a couple days. We fly in, we come to Boulder. Somebody said, "Go to the rooftop of the Rio," this Mexican restaurant. Nice. We had left Atlanta. It was 95 degrees humidity. We get to Boulder. It's like 70. The sun's going down. We're like, we're like one margarita in, and we're like, this is it.
We're not leaving.
But the original plan, it's interesting, Todd. We were going to, if we liked it, I was going to commute back and forth, maybe get a corporate apartment, try to figure out what I want to do for work, meet people, network, let the kids do another year in school, and then move out. And this was July 7th, 2014. And my wife said, it was not really spontaneous, but she said this night, she said, "Bart, if we're going to do this, let's get the kids in school in August."
Okay.
And we went back to Atlanta. We sold half of everything we owned, and we moved out 3 weeks later.
Wow.
And that was 10 years ago. We didn't know anybody. We had never been here before. And yeah, that's how we picked Boulder.
So you like the zip code strategy. It worked out pretty good.
It worked for me.
Yeah.
And shortly after I got here, I saw why. It felt like it was my people. And interesting part of the story, and it's the genesis of kind of what I'm doing now, but I started reaching out to people to network, coffee, lunch, can I buy you dinner or whatever?
Mm-hmm.
And this one woman, she's a venture capitalist. Her name is Elizabeth Krause. And she said, "I don't do coffee or lunch." She said, "Meet me at the trailhead and we'll go for a walk." And I remember telling my wife, like, "I don't know what to wear. This is weird. I'm going to this hiking meeting." And I mean, it's very common here, but coming from Atlanta, like, it's very foreign. And I show up, wearing my hiking clothes, whatever. But something special happened that day because I'm walking shoulder to shoulder. I'm not making direct eye contact. And I was just more authentic and more vulnerable. And it was the first time in a few months. And I just told her, I said, I got forced out of the company I founded. And I thought for sure she'd stop in the trailhead and go, "Oh my gosh." And she was like, "Oh yeah, that happens all the time." And we talked about other stuff. And
yeah,
but I just felt more alive. I felt more myself. And I came home and I remember telling my wife, and it was like the first time I just felt liberated. And, similar to you didn't know my full story. All people assume was, all right, this guy raised $50 million in capital. He scaled to 4,000 locations. Then he moved out to Boulder with his family. Like, no one really knew that I was forced out. So entrepreneurs would call and say, "Hey, can I pick your brain? I really want to get together, or, I'm raising capital, or can you give me advice on this deck?" And I would tell them all the same thing. "Meet me in my house. We'll go for a walk. We're going to go for a hike." And I started doing that. And we did these hiking meetings, and it became my default. Which leads me to what I do now. But I, through the journey, I really looked at, what do I really, really value? And what are my personal values? And I came up with a personal value statement that actually framed by a wall back there.
Okay.
And I can read it to you, but it's, for me, it's like my North Star. And when I have decisions and I'm trying to figure out what to do, and I can read that and say, okay, is this aligned with my personal values? And then the sister exercise to that I learned from a forum mate of mine is your zone of genius, right? There's 4 quadrants. There's things we love. There's things we hate. There's things we're great at. There's things we're terrible. The things you love and you're great, that's your zone of genius, right? Gay Hendricks came up with this, and it really helped me realize. I'll give you an example. Like, I'm pretty good at managing a team.
Yeah.
I just hate it.
Yeah, right.
I am terrible at finance, and I hate it.
Okay.
But I love to lead with passion, enthusiasm, turn a vision into reality, like make shit happen.
Mm-hmm.
Love being outside. I love helping people realize what's possible. I love inspiring other people. So that led me to doing what I do now. And what I figured out was to really be the happiest, healthiest, most productive, you want to live an intentional life that's happening by me instead of to me. Because for so long it was happening to me. It's like, I wonder if this will happen. If I get this promotion, if I raise this money, maybe he'll. No, I flipped the script, and now it's happening by me. And that led me to found a company called Business Outside, which is what I'm doing now.
Yeah. And it's, you host lots of people and you teach them passion, leadership, vision, outside.
So Business Outside is about getting people out of their comfort zone, outside of corporate norms. And we use nature as a silent partner. So when we're walking shoulder to shoulder, like, you don't need to be inside the four walls of a conference room looking at PowerPoint slides. You actually talk on the trail. And instead of a keynote presentation, I'll have somebody stand up on a rock and give us a mini TED talk. And I find that we're more authentic, we're more vulnerable, we can build trust faster. And so that's what we do. We work with corporations and teams and leadership groups and YPO, EO forums. And we do retreats to help them think differently and to build trust with one another.
So, a lot of my clients, particularly, post-pandemic, are wrestling with the, totally remote versus, in-office dilemma. I think a lot more people are embracing a lot more remote culture, even remote first, remote only, or totally remote. But at some point, they all miss being the same place with the same people. This seems like a great opportunity for people to come together on a quarterly basis, or every once in a while. You have to be breathing the same air and talk to people as humans, not just on a Zoom call. What are some of the things you see happen, when everybody comes together and then they get in maybe a little bit, I hate the word uncomfortable, because I feel like outdoors is kind of where we're supposed to be. That's where you kind of plug back into the world. Everything kind of melts away and it becomes, basic again.
So there's what do you see? Few trends happening, and then I think it's why there's so many kind of tailwinds or winds in our sails. One is with the hybrid and remote workforce, right? People are craving this personal connection. And you're sitting at home, you're in Zoom calls, and you're not interacting with your coworkers and things. Well, people still have to get together, and they'll do these retreats and offsite meetings, everything, but it's different than it used to be. Right? It's not about these boondoggles and boozing it up at the bar and playing golf and doing whiskey tastings and all this. It's not. People, when they get together now, they want it to be meaningful. They want a genuine connection, and they want to really get to know each other at a human level. So, I like to say we're not human resources. We're actually humans. And if we can take the time to get to know each other as mothers and fathers and caregivers, and Zoom changed all that. You see kids like walking around, and you're on Zoom, and all of a sudden you get to know their family, and it's like, oh, they actually have a real family.
Yeah.
And the way, you and I are similar age, the way I grew up, there was a personal you and a business you. And you leave the personal shit at home. That's not true. I think there's one you, and the more authentic we can bring everybody. So to your point, so nature gets people, we're a little uncomfortable, but when you share an experience like that together, and all of a sudden you're walking and clothing doesn't matter as much. I mean, you have to have clothes, but just like, you don't have to have a suit and tie, and, you're wearing tennis shoes, whatever, and you're just walking. And then, you'll meet up for dinner or have a picnic and on a blanket, and it's like, you're talking about real stuff. So
do you find, my sons did Boy Scouts for a minute, or for a while. We saw this kind of thing with the generations changing. The generation that grew up with an iPhone, in their hand, hey kid, here's an iPad, watch a movie so mom and dad can eat dinner. Do you find generational differences when people go out there on the trail, with technology, hey, put your phone away? And then, are different generations better equipped to deal with people one-on-one? Or do you feel like there's work we have to do as a society if we've forgotten how to be people just one-on-one talking to other people?
I think there's two things there. I think that technology is one of those that kind of go away when you're out in nature for whatever reason. You're walking. It's just, you've got to pay attention, like where you're walking. It's not, even in an airport, you know where you're going, and you can just bang out some emails while you're walking. Like, it's not like that when you're on a trail. And so I think naturally that helps. And for me, I find I'm more focused, I'm more creative, I'm more energetic, authentic, all of it, just being outside. I think, but generationally, I think why we're hitting a sweet spot is, the younger folks, some of my colleagues and coworkers, they grew up with this. They're very in touch with their feelings, their emotions. They understand, this whole mental health thing. It's the people like you and I, we were never exposed to any of this stuff. And we find that using nature as a way to supercharge and to get people to realize that we're all just humans. Right. And you get to the feeling and the emotion, that's where the magic happens. You take off the mask. When somebody comes up at a networking thing and they're like, "Hey, how you doing?" "Oh, I'm good. How are you?" "Oh, we should catch up sometime." It's like, I'm right here. Let's catch up right now. Like,
yeah, we have an hour. We're going to be on this trail.
let's change we have to change the way that we interact. And it's not, what do you do? Like, that doesn't tell you anything. How about, what are you passionate about? What's giving you energy? What brings you joy? Like, if you can get to the feeling and the emotion, you take off the mask. Because being an entrepreneur is hard. And I know a lot of entrepreneurs will listen to your podcast. That the thing I didn't realize is, like, we're all going through this shit together. No one knows what the hell they're doing. They're all faking it. They really are. And they have imposter syndrome, and they don't know what. And it's like, when people realize this and you start taking off the mask and you're just like real, and you're just like, I don't know what the hell you're talking about.
Yeah.
But the problem is, we got to put up all these veneers and all this stuff. So we think the investors and our board and everybody else thinks we know what we're talking about. But yeah.
I feel like that's a superpower. Once you can kind of get past, and that's the difference between a first-time entrepreneur and a multiple subsequent entrepreneur, is you ask for help a whole lot quicker. You go, I know what I know, and I got that part. I know what I don't know. Like, I need a finance person, and you build your team accordingly, and you're way more willing to ask for help. It sounds like you help peel back that veneer very quickly, and you say, hey, we're all people here. It's okay. Not everybody has all the answers. Nobody has all the answers, but you got a team of people here. The faster you can start relying on each other and talk about stuff, the better it's going to go. And that's a super powerful aha moment for a lot of people.
You think about, like, a bell curve. 70% of the conversations we have in life are right in the middle. Okay. How's the weather? How's your job? How are your kids? We should catch up sometime. You think the Falcons will win the Super Bowl? Like, for the most part, nobody cares. It's when you get to the 10% on each side of that bell curve, positive and negative, you get to the feeling and the emotion. I'm mad. I'm scared. I'm pissed off. I'm really excited.
Okay.
And the tail, right? The bell curve, the tail, the 5% on both sides. That's where you get to the real meat, the real, it could be deep, dark secret. It could be trauma. Like, you don't share that with hardly anybody.
Mm-hmm.
I'll give you a quick example. So if I'm in the 70%, I'd say, hey, I'm Bart. I have 2 kids. My kids are 18 and 20. Life's pretty good. I live in Boulder, Colorado. I have this company called BusinessOutside. I wrote a book last year. I like to open water swim. I hike quite often. Life's pretty good. Right? Nobody cares.
Right. Right. What do you do with that, right?
If you
I'll let you up on LinkedIn.
If you really, really knew me, and I stepped outside of the 70 just a little bit, I'd say, I'm 4 months away from being an empty nester, and it makes me sad.
Oh,
and I'm going to miss my son. My daughter's already off at college. I'm proud. I'm proud of them, but I'm sad, and I'm a little apprehensive of, like, what are my wife and I, how we're going to spend our time. And then if I really went to the tail, which I did at the very beginning of this call because I wanted you to see the vulnerability, is I got forced out of the company I founded. Uh-huh. Like, most people don't start there. I do.
It's life-changing.
Yeah. I do because it gives other people the permission. And so when I realized that, and it was one of the best gifts I was ever given. 10 years ago, I was at a forum retreat and somebody drew this bell curve and they said it. And they went through the example just like me. And the guy starts crying. I was like, holy shit. And I was like, and he said, do you see the difference? 70, 10, 5.
Mm-hmm.
So I would encourage, if people are trying to improve and grow and be the best CEO they can be, just get outside the 70% just a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And you're doing it when you can get to the emotion or the feeling. It's not facts. It's not going to the Super Bowl, those are cool shoes. Like, no, nobody cares. I'm sad. I'm mad. I'm angry. I'm really excited. I can't wait. Whatever it is.
So get a little uncomfortable.
Yeah. I do a keynote on 5 secrets to deeper connection. And one of the secrets is get outside of your comfort zone. And part of it is that bell curve. I call it the nature of conversations. And, 70% of the conversations right in the middle. And next time you go to a networking thing, right? Tech CFO, they do all of, how you doing? I'm good. How you? That's a cool car. Like, nobody cares. So just change it up by asking some better questions.
Makes sense.
In fact, I got a good one. A lot of people come to me and they're like, I'm kind of introverted. Like, what do I do? I'm not sure. Like, how do I have these conversations? 4, 3, 2, 1. I learned this from a guy in Denver. 4, 3, 2, 1. So think about, everybody should have 4 stories, 3 quotes, 2 facts, and 1 question you can ask anybody. You could have these in your backpack, right? So 4 stories. It's a challenge and a challenge and a success, personal and business.
Okay.
Challenge, success, personal, business. 3 facts that right, that make you interesting.
Okay.
Two quotes that that inspire you. And then 1 question you can ask anyone in the world. And the question I love to ask is, knowing what you know now, what would you tell yourself, 20 years ago?
Love that question.
Because you could ask a billionaire or a homeless guy in the street and you could still ask the question. So it's a question you could ask anyone. That's 4, 3, 2, 1.
Okay, Bart. So I've got to ask you your favorite question. This solo health thing I know is super emotional, super painful, but probably super impactful and change your life in ways that you couldn't have possibly imagined. If you could go back to young Bart in 2008, 2009, 2007, what would you tell yourself, knowing what you know now?
Really know who your investors are. I think that's helpful. I think understand what your zone of genius is and lean into that. For the first few years, I remember being really insecure about not being great at finance. And I was reading all the books and trying to take courses, finance for non-financials. And I finally, one of my mentors, Tom Lamb, lives there in Atlanta. And he said, there's all types of CEOs. He said, there's finance CEOs, there's operations CEOs. He said, you're a sales CEO. Lean into it. Get a good CFO. Right. So I did that. I wish I would have learned that a little earlier and leaned into my zone of genius and understand what I'm really good at. And then I think another one that I would say is everybody's in their own movie and nobody's watching your movie. Don't worry about other people, what they're thinking and what they're saying and whatever. Just know what you're great at. Put your head down and go do it. And nobody's watching your movie.
So at one point you mentioned living intentionally, and that's a mature thing to get to the point where you've had enough experiences and you go, okay, something's got to change here. Was there something that happened? Was there a seminal moment for you where you probably got into that deep dark hole and you said, okay, something's got to change. And then you come out the other side and you go, okay, I have to live more intentionally for me. I have to be.
Well, the dark hole is when they say you're not the guy to run this company and you get forced out of the company you founded. And then it's like, okay, what do I do next? I'm going to search for a job? Like, no. So instead of looking for a job, I just created an opportunity. Mm-hmm. And to create an opportunity is different. And for me, it was, can I figure out what's aligned with my values and my zone of genius? And if I can find something or create something that's in harmony with both of those, that's when I'm going to be the happiest, healthiest, most productive. And that's what happened. And I did that. I created a very intentional life. So the book that I actually wrote, which I didn't really intend to write a book. I was telling these stories on a trail and people would ask about my journey and I would share. And people kept saying, you got to write this down. This is great. So the subtitle of the book is called Discover Your Path Forward. And the title that I almost went with is how to live a more intentional life. But it's really a modern trail guide to living an intentional life. That's what it is. So it's figuring out your zone of genius, your personal values, and then creating a life that's happening, by me instead of to me.
Mm-hmm. And you look very happy and very healthy today.
Thank you.
So I think it's working for sure. When you get on the trail, not everybody is ready to have the experience that they could have, so, part of leadership is sometimes you're out front and sometimes you're in the pack with people. What do you look for when you have, I don't know, maybe more introverted or maybe less, more guarded emotional types, maybe our Gen Xers, aren't ready to talk about some of these hard things. Do you have any things that you like to do to help them prepare or open up or,
so it's really cool. No, thanks for asking. I actually have realized this in the last year or so. One of the things that we do is, we call it a connection walk or connection hike, right? I was just in LA and I led this connection walk for 80 people. And I would say 80% of them were introverts. And what I find is the way that we do this walk is I'd say, I want you to pair up with somebody you've never met, you don't know very well. And I give them a question to think about, to ponder. And it starts really basic. And I consider 3 levels of questions, and we can post the questions in the show notes. I've got level 1, 2, and 3. So level 1, I wouldn't say they're superficial, but they're pretty easy. I'll give you an example. So like a level 1 question would be, what's something you celebrated or you're proud of in the last 6 months? Right?
Okay.
It's not how are you, it's what is something you celebrate you're proud of. It gets to the feeling, the emotion. Usually people get excited and they're like, oh, birth of my child, or so-and-so had a birthday, whatever. Something you celebrate you're proud of. Now pair up with somebody you don't know, follow me. And what happens is you're walking shoulder to shoulder. You've got something to think about. You got something to talk about. You're not making direct eye contact. Introverts love this. They love it.
Okay.
They want to have these meaningful conversations. They just don't want to be in a group and have to start it. And the reason I hate the word networking, because most people, they don't do it right. And it's very transactional. It's like, oh, you're a lawyer. Can I get your business card? Like, no. So it's not that we want to network. What we want to do is we want to build connection. We want relationships. So if you really want to do that right, you ask better questions. So for introverts, just show a little bit of vulnerability. But these discussion prompts and then facilitating it in such a way that you pair up and then you switch partners, and it's very intentional. It's very intentional the way we do it. And then by the end of the walk, you can get to a level 3 question. And a level 3 question might be, what do you want your legacy to be? What do you want to be remembered for? Right? You don't start out of the gate with some stranger like that, but a couple hours in, all of a sudden you're sharing, you learn more. We've done this with teams, Todd, and they're like, oh yeah, we know each other pretty well. We've worked together 20 years. Like, really? Okay. And you get back on the hike and people are like, I had no idea that guy, his son has Down syndrome. And he's been in this special, like 20 years they work together.
Wow.
Yeah. It's because
life-changing.
well, we bounce through life, and it's like you get that report, and yeah, I'm here, and okay, and who's going to win the Super Bowl this week? No, let's go through a routine. So it's almost like those defibrillator paddles, when you have a heart attack, and you wake people up, and you're like, oh, okay. Better questions.
So this is Dave Cummins always used to talk about engineered serendipity, with his tech incubator. Yeah, this is kind of the same thing, right? Where you force people to mix and confront some of the emotional issues.
David was one of my forum mates that helped me when I moved to Boulder. So yeah, I have a lot of respect for him and what he's doing, and he was a big supporter of me when I made the move. And he was actually one of the first calls that I made. I was on the top of the mountain in Aspen, and my wife and I decided we were going to make the move. And I called my parents, and then I called my forum mates.
Okay.
And told them.
And the forum, that's
my YPO forum.
Okay. And it sounds like that's been an amazing thing for you. And you mentioned EO too. Would you recommend those types of organizations for people?
I would recommend a forum. You don't have to be in YP or EO to have a forum group. In fact, I run 5 forum groups that are outside of those organizations. It's so powerful. And I can't say enough about if you get the right mix of people. And what happens is you share family, personal, business. It's all confidential. You meet once a month. You take off, the mask, and you really share in a confidential way. And for me, it's like my personal board of directors. And in fact, I'm going to do an event. Some of your clients might be interested. I'm going to do an event in October. We haven't announced it yet, but it's going to be with a guy named Michael Easter. He wrote the book called The Comfort Crisis.
Okay.
And we're going to do a retreat called Discover Your Path Forward. We want to find people that are in some sort of transition. And then it's likely that they'll experience forum, and then we'll launch them into a forum after that. So.
Very cool. I think that's a powerful moment in people's lives when they've done something so consuming as a startup, and then, odds are pretty good that it's going to explode spectacularly at the end, and come to an abrupt stop. Most of them do. And, then what? Right. And then we as a culture don't do great at saying, hey, let's get you to whatever's next as expeditiously as possible, but let's be intentional about it.
That's right.
And move you forward. Get a posse together that's going to support you.
Yeah.
So you get out there in the world, Bart, and I know you travel and see lots and lots of people. What you got any great travel stories to tell us? I know you've done athletic events all over the world. What's a great travel story that you can share with us?
Travel story? I mean, I'm doing a lot of crazy adventures all the time. I'm trying to think. Well, this will tie to some Atlanta connections. I got a call from a guy. He said, there's a group of us. We're gonna run the Grand Canyon, rim to rim to rim. I said,
oh wow,
what's that? He said, well, it's just like it sounds. He's like, we're gonna go into the North Rim. We're gonna run down, and I'm like, well, how far is that? It's like, well, it's 11 miles down and 7 miles across, and 8 miles up, and it's 5,000, 6,000 feet of elevation gain, and then you got to turn around and come back. It's like, holy shit! Like, are you? And I thought about it for a few weeks, and something just provoked me. And I think it was in January, and I pulled out my phone. I sent him a video text to his little group chat, and I said, I'm in. And I started training for this thing, and that's it. That's a travel adventure. I went out to the Grand Canyon and hiked. Actually, we ran it. It was rim to rim to rim. It was 42 miles and about 11,000 feet of vert. And it was a big day. So that was a one day adventure that
holy smokes,
I will always remember. And I'm glad I did it. I got to know a handful of people a lot better. And we had, different discussion prompts, and we would talk about all kinds of things. And, what you share on the trail, it's pretty cool. So it's, that was before Business Outside was born.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Very cool. Well, Bart, it's been great having you here in the Sky Lounge. Great catching up with you. And if people want to follow up with you after the podcast here, what's the best way to get in touch with you on the internet?
BusinessOutside.com or Bart-Foster.com. Either one. And I'd be delighted to host people out in Boulder, or we come to them. But
very cool.
Thanks for your time.
Well, yeah. Well, it's good to see you. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us in the Sky Lounge. Please like and subscribe to hear more from Tales from the Sky Lounge here and anywhere else you get your podcasts.